It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Robin, the newest RGB 5-star that was just shown earlier this morning over on YouTube. As with all my First Thoughts and Initial Impressions videos, I'll give you my 2 cents on the character. Do I think Robin's good? Where would I play her? What types of gear and artifacts would I play her on? All that stuff you've come to expect from me in a First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video. As an aside, Disciplinary Prefect Arya was also just shown earlier this morning, and if you want to see my thoughts on her, that video will be linked down in this one's description. Anyways, without any further ado, let's take a look at Robin's S3 animation.
Guess I could use a warm-up. Been a while since I had fun. Should have stayed in the Night's Lane, darlings. Then again, who am I to say? Looks like I'm still in one piece.
Man, I think that animation is tops. I've loved it ever since they showed us the concept with the Epic 7 Origin trailer some months back. What's more amazing, I feel like, though, than that skill 3 animation is Robin's English voiceover artist, who is Morla Gorandana. Now, I've not been familiar with her body of work, but a quick glance shows me she's pretty accomplished, having worked with Reba Burr, who is Dragon Bride Senya, Sea Phantom Politis in this game, and also legendary VAs like Phil Lamar. You most likely have heard her as Lilandra in X-Men 97, and she's also the lead from a film a good friend of mine will not stop gushing about that I have never watched, called Mars Express. So yeah, based on what I'm hearing here, I'm definitely gonna have to check that film out. Moving on from my nerdy trivia and on to Robin's stats, she is a Fire Ranger of the Capricorn zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with characters like Bihu, Blue Flan, and Niqual, along with several other limited heroes. Taking a closer look at her stats, she has 1,003 attack, 585 defense, 5,704 health, 115 base speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 30% starting effectiveness, and no starting effect resistance. This translates to an overall pretty balanced stat line, if you want to call it that, at least in the general sense. Her attack stat is pretty low compared to other damage dealers in the game, but her bulk stats are pretty high, at least for a ranger, making her pretty average in that aspect. Speed is good at 115. It's not amazing, but it is above average compared to most of the cast, and 30% starting effectiveness is very good for a debuffer, which, spoiler alert, she absolutely is. Anyways, looking at her imprints, effectiveness percentage for the team, and attack percentage for herself, nothing to write home about, but definitely something that, if you really like the character, would be beneficial to her. As always, before I jump into the character analysis, let's go over the character's kit so that way we are all on the same page. And for this one, I'm going to do it in the reverse order of the skills shown. That way, it's a little bit easier, I feel like, to digest, because the third skill really synergizes with the first and second, so it's better if you know what those do first and foremost, at least in my opinion. So the basic attack skill here is Neutralize. Attacks the enemy with a dagger and has an 85 to 100% chance based on skill level to inflict bleed for 2 turns. Moving on to the skill 2, it is Clear the Back. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 4-turn cooldown. Attacks all enemies with a grenade launcher, dispelling 2 buffs before a 85 to 100% chance, depending on skill level, to inflict 3 burn effects for 1 turn. Increases Robin's combat readiness by 50%. And finally, Robin's skill 3, Say Hello to My Little Friends. Obviously a reference to Scarface there. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on skill level. Attacks all enemies with Robin's secret weapon and extends duration of debuffs, except for those which prevent movement by 1 turn, before having an 85 to 100% chance based on skill level to inflict decreased defense for 2 turns. When this skill is not on cooldown at the start of an ally's extra turn, grants swift attack to the caster and increases combat readiness by 25%. In case you forgot, Swift Attack is the buff that is granted by characters like Ahmed and Lone Wolf Para that increases the bearer's combat readiness by 50% at the end of each of their turns. Soul Burn effect for the cost of 20 souls at the end of the turn detonates bleed and burn effects inflicted on the target. Now that you know the kit, let's talk about the character. Robin's kit is pretty fitting for an assassin in my opinion. Get in, do the thing, get out. Before I jump into the one ingredient I think this character needs to succeed in PvP, I would be remiss to not point out the current Battle Frenzy effect in World Arena, in case you've been living under a rock. As I'm recording this video, burns and bleeds do 50% more damage in RTA than they would in things like Arena or Guild Wars. You need only to look at the climbing win rate for heroes like Silverblade Araminta and Bihu to realize just how strong burns are in the current state of the game, and Robin has them in spades. Her skill 2, Clear the Back, is an incredibly powerful setup skill that removes 2 buffs from all enemies before putting down a whopping 3 burns, before granting herself 50% combat readiness. That leads us right into her skill 3, Say Hello to My Little Friends, which is key to team building with Robin. What ties this whole kit together on this hero is the swift attack that's found on this skill. You want to pair Robin with any fast opener that takes an extra turn that could trigger the 25% combat readiness push and grant her that swift attack. Hell, even young Senya will work because she has an extra turn in case for some reason you just want to use her as some kind of anti-Harseti tech. From there, you want to use Clear the Back to inflict burns on the entire enemy team, gaining 50% combat readiness from that skill, followed by the additional 50% from Swift Attack. This lets you unload your skill 3 to AoE defense break the entire enemy team, and more importantly, extend the duration of all burns, which effectively doubles their damage. As a reminder on how burn works, it deals damage equal to 60% of the user's attack, ignoring 70% of the target's defense. Well, if you reduce the target's defense by 70% with a defense break, and then double the damage by, increasing the duration of the burns, and then you also get 50% more damage from Battle Frenzy and World Arena. Yeah, hopefully you can see where this is going. Characters are just simply going to go boom when you set this character up correctly. I think just even the tankiest characters in this game are going to explode in front of Robin. That includes Boss Arunca, by the way. Or at least you hope it would. Yeah, you never know with how much effect resistance people are putting on that character nowadays. Anyways, Robin feels like a very compact character, making her an incredibly easy cleave pivot for anyone, even turn 2 players. She's obviously designed to work with Renak, but it's not uncommon for turn 2 players to use something like Lone Wolf Peyra as a cleanser as well as speed contester. If your opponent is slow and you have Lone Wolf Peyra under ban and protection, you could just jam Robin solo in your 4th or 5th pick slot and just threaten to blow up their entire team unless they bring a cleanser. I say bring a cleanser because the burns don't expire instantly without the soul burn, so if you don't bring a mage with her, there's going to be a counterplay window where all those burns can be cleansed, and that's a huge downside for the character. Another huge piece of counterplay to her is going to be buff stacking. Since Clear the Back only gets rid of 2 buffs, teams that start with critical hit resistance from Navy Captain Landy or have stealth characters due to Guiding Light that have both the immunity set and barrier that are granted to them from things like Bastion of Perlucia or equipment sets, they could completely sidestep all of her burns, so please pay attention to the Knights and Ranger heroes that you are facing off against. There is a chance that you'll use Clear the Back and just won't get any value out of the character because they have 3 or more starting buffs. Speaking of buff stacking, let's talk about how to build Robin for PvP. Speed and immunity with Guiding Light is going to be the go-to, I feel like, on this character, I think, for the vast majority of players. Guiding Light is pretty much a staple artifact for any ranger to safely let them get to their very first turn. And I think that's something that's really important for Robin, who isn't going to be pushing the highest speeds possible. The stealth granted by that artifact, along with the immunity set, means that if you pair her with a protection set user, she's going to be completely safe from most other openers disrupting her game plan. That's why I feel like it is the go-to option. She's weak against buff stacking, but she's also very strong with buff stack options. Speed is also going to be really important, I feel like, for this hero. I suspect that most Robins will land between 240 to 280 speed, with 255 speed being the most common. At 240 speed, Robin will cut to the front with most extra turn openers at 320 speed or slower. 255 speed will let her cut to the front with a 340 speed Renak, which, as far as I'm aware, nobody has that currently on any server in Epic 7, but there are people pushing 336 to 337, so I figured I'd include it here. And lastly, we have the 280 speed, which is probably the fastest realistic number that you're going to use her that will actually still cut to the front, and that's primarily if you're going to be facing off against things like Abyssal Euphine or Red Politis. The safe bet, I feel like for most people, is going to be to just jam her around 250 to 255 speed and dump everything else into effectiveness and attack. Bulk, by the way, can be optional if you want to actually go for it. A Nequal, by the way, who has the same base stats, you could play her comfortably at 255 speed with good bulk and having well over 200% effective. So I expect something very similar for Robin and her stat line. Lastly, let's talk about her artifact because, well, I think Guiding Light is pretty much going to be the go-to for PvP, but when it comes to PvE options, that's clearly where this one comes into play. Anyways, the artifact is an Assassin's Pledge. It increases the effectiveness of the user by 15 to 30% based on artifact level. After attacking, there is a 50 to 100% chance to inflict burn on the target for 1 turn, again based on artifact level, and this effect can only be activated once every 2 turns. Essentially, it's Soul Bad Guy's Junkyard Dog, but for Rangers. It's effectively better and worse in some aspects, right? Because it's only once every 2 turns, but you do get some effective, so hey, at least that's good. It's clearly not meant to be the PvP artifact for this character, and I suspect that's due to the new rift, which was also shown in Robin's trailer. A cursory observation of the video suggests that teams need not only burns, but to hit the enemy with a debuff from a skill 1, skill 2, and skill 3 from characters on your team. Just look at Robin's kit. She's got a bleed on skill 1, burns on skill 2, and a defense break on skill 3. Character checks out to me. You're probably going to want her for Rift. Overall, I expect Robin to be a powerful, must-pull unit for all endgame players. Burns are incredibly potent in the current state of RTA, being one of the best answers to tanky heroes like Bossa Runka and pesky DPS like Spirit Eye Celine, at least when we consider the win rate data. Independent of this, she's very clearly designed to be the best Rift unit for the next 6 months. Skipping Kayn, Immortal Wukong, and especially Fene has proved to be a huge mistake for many players, causing them to fall behind on farming and clearing PvE content for the foreseeable future. Even if this character isn't limited, even if there is the threat of a collab around the corner, even if the character falls flat in PvP, I still think you should pull for Robin just so you can have her for Rift and PvE. And those are my thoughts on Robin. But now it's time for me to hear from you. Let me know how you feel about Robin in the comment section below. And in case you haven't seen it already, make sure to check out my ML Aria impressions video, again linked in this video's description. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.